Welcome, everyone, to Scrub Sessions episode 4. It's my absolute pleasure to be talking today to the extraordinary harpist Marshall McGuire, who is also the Director of Programming at the Melbourne Recital Centre, and some of you may not know this, but a long-standing volunteer in our music and health program here at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. So it's an absolute pleasure to talk to Marshall. Marshall and I have known each other for many, many years, and it's been really beautiful to be able to work together in lots of different iterations across our careers and really be working a lot in the role of music and health. So welcome, Marshall. Thank you for joining us today.
Lovely to be here, of course.
Wonderful. So Marshall, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, look, what to tell? Harpist is probably the first place to start. I've been a musician all my life, really. It's the only thing I ever really wanted to do. I started by playing piano when I was 6. I joined a choir at the cathedral here in Melbourne, at St Paul's Cathedral, when I was 8, and did that until my voice broke and I had to leave. And then I was encouraged to take up an orchestral instrument. And I was taking the Melbourne Symphony concerts, and I looked at all the instruments, and this one didn't appeal, or that one didn't appeal. And then I saw a harp, and it was gold, and it was on its own, and it was big, and it was played by a man, importantly, because I hadn't really thought that, you know how people sort of ascribe instruments to certain genders. So harpists people think they're female, conductors are male. Well, it doesn't exist so much anymore, but at that time it was there. And then I also remembered watching the Marx Brothers films with my dad and being transfixed by Harpo Marx, and the magic, those moments where he would just sit down at the harp and everything would stop. So there seemed to be some sort of power associated with the harp. Anyway, long story short, I asked my parents if I could learn the harp, and they said yes. And then we had to get a car to go with the harp.
I was going to say.
Find a harp and find a teacher. And it's been my constant joy, companion life ever since the age of 12, really. So it's led me to amazing adventures, as a life in music always does. It leads you down unexpected pathways. Every plan I had for my career has never actually happened, but it's always been these incidental and accidental things. I ended up playing at Sydney Opera House as the harpist there for 4 or 5 years, at the time when, Baz Luhrmann's La Boheme was premiered, and when Joan Sutherland retired, and so many amazing experiences. I went back and did some postgraduate study in London at the Royal College of Music, which was great. Really good to go back as an older student to really know, I guess, have more of a fixed idea about what you wanted to study and where the gaps were, actually. As a young graduate from the VCA, I thought I knew everything, and gradually you realise that you know what you know, but there's a lot more out there. And then I freelanced for 10, 15 years and gradually moved into management of music and orchestras and venues, because I've always been interested in how things work. And also, more broadly, I think importantly, music outside my own music. So with harp music, I guess with a lot of instruments, it's fairly prescribed and potentially a bit narrow, but the world of music is vast, and I just love immersing myself in everybody else's stories as well, planning how things work, working with audiences and trying to match music and musicians with audiences and spaces. So that's kind of the career to date.
That's quite a career, Marshall. In fact, I remember meeting you when you were in London.
Correct.
I think it's interesting you mentioned about that whole kind of imagery about the harp being a healing instrument. Of course, there's the history, isn't there, of, Orfeo. Doesn't he play he plays the lute and the harp, and they, to get through and to calm, soothe the savage beast. I've always enjoyed the way you play and the collaborations you have, because it doesn't always sound like a harp. Like you play with your heart, as all beautiful musicians and successful musicians do. But you also, I'm always fascinated by the way you make the harp. And as you know, I've written a piece for you too, how you make the harp not really sound like a harp. It's not all, I do love the, but how it's a really interesting interpretation of the instrument. Has that been a deliberate thing for you? Is it just sort of...
I guess, no, it has been, and it's a really good observation, I guess, because we do have images about what instruments sound like and stand for, I guess. And the harp has a long history. It goes back, it's referred to in the Bible. It goes back, thousands of years. And one of the joys of the harp is that you can tap into that whole history of the sound that it makes. And harp-like instruments, sort of plucked harp-like instruments like the lyre and so on. And there's so much, I don't know, joy to be had in uncovering these sounds. It's a little bit like, you know, that story of sculpture about how great sculptors, you know, they reckon that the sound is in the marble and they just uncover all the bits to get to it. And it feels like sometimes instruments are like that. All of these sounds are in the harp, and it feels like sometimes we only use 10% of them. So I'm always interested in the other 90%, you know, of the making more of the percussive side of the harp, or you know, rather than playing the strings, playing the soundboard as well. Much like, you know, guitarists do this as well. You play it as a percussion instrument, it becomes a whole instrument. And because it's a fully harmonic instrument, you can play chords as well as melody. You've got, really, it's a whole world of sound. So with a whole lot of new music I play, certainly I've taken it to some extremes. But also when I'm playing, I guess, I try to evoke memories of sound and try and think about, you know, if it's a piece from the classical era in the early 19th century, or if it's a piece from the 16th century, try and evoke what it might have sounded like there, to take into account, you know, literature and stories we have and the instruments that were around at the time. And also I play Baroque harps as well, so harps that are modelled on instruments that were around in the 17th century, and that's a whole different world of imagination, and that influences everything. So it again, unearthing the sounds that exist within the instrument.
Might have to get you to do a show and tell on those Baroque harps.
We might have to.
It's interesting what you're talking about evoking, and I think it sort of leads into the next sort of part of the conversation, which is around music as therapy. So often, you know, without a doubt, I know I use your recordings to my patients, I recommend them, but also that live music element and evoking and transforming someone's experience. It's been a really tricky time, let's face it, for the last, let's say 2 years. How have you used music for yourself? How have you used all those beautiful things to help you cope?
It's been tricky, actually, and it's been a really interesting time to reflect quite deeply on the meaning of music in our lives, hasn't it? Because live music, playing music one-to-one, performer to audience, has effectively disappeared in that live environment. And for me, it made me realise that was at the core of, that's kind of my purpose. That's the reason I do it, is to have that conversation with another person in the same room. And I found I missed that a lot. And in fact, I remember after first lockdown, it must have been the first long lockdown we had in Melbourne, and I was walking up the street and there was a guitarist playing outside one of the shops on the street, and I actually got quite tearful because it was the first time I'd heard music moving air in my space made by someone else. And that was quite a profound moment because it reinforced what I'd been missing. I haven't engaged a lot with music online. I'm not a great listener to recordings or radio or concerts that have been filmed online. It doesn't bring me so much joy. And again, it just made me realize it's that personal connection that's important to me. So even my own practice, I think I always, with musicians, you always kind of have a destination for your practice. You're practicing because it leads to a concert or a gig or a recording. And without that gig, I kind of thought, well, what's the point in practicing? So I found that very hard to keep up a discipline there of practice. And I still haven't quite managed that, and I'll get back to it. But I'm kind of pleased to say that technically, you know, the fingers still work okay. So everything's still there, but it needs that purpose of getting in front of an audience. I've done, I think it's 4 concerts in the last 15 months, which is not enough.
No.
And it's really stark. And again, as you know so well with your work, it's that power of communication, direct communication between people that we've lacked, but which I think sort of perversely has actually really strongly reinforced the absolute need for it. It's not an optional thing. It's not a nice thing that we need. It's actually it's a thing we spiritually we need.
Yeah, it's not a
And
luxury. It's essential.
It's essential. It's the essence of why we all go to concerts, why we all play live music, why we listen to live bands, why we write songs.
So we, as you know, kept playing throughout the pandemic, hence my lovely face gear, and normally would have a shield on. And because of that, because of the intense nature of what was happening in the hospital, because if we took that away, then it would have just, it would have been, and people often talk about like it's wartime nursing and things like that. But I mean, even in war times, they had, Florence Nightingale used to get musicians in. But it's interesting to be amongst the only kind of people that were able to keep doing music, how ironically in a hospital where because it was so needed. So like I've, not that I needed more evidence, but I think we've got a lot more evidence. And I think our challenge now is how we continue to do that and work with each other to, not just you and me, everybody, to heal, to recover. And your role at the MRC is going to play a big part in that. Absolutely.
Well, I think so. And we're talking now about, we're welcoming audiences back imminently. And I'm quite confident that, the audiences will be there because, it's a need. It's like food and air. We need it as a very important part of our lives. And those moments we've had in between lockdowns where we have managed to open the venue and have audiences in, again, have been quite profoundly moving to have that power of people listening. And sometimes it can be so quiet but so intensely active.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's a really lovely connection, which I'm looking forward to hearing again.
Yeah, and also I look forward to coming and hear you play. But you did join us on some scrub choir projects because you're a long-standing volunteer at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. We worked out since 2004 you played on
goes
some
back that far. Yeah.
So why, I mean, obviously you know me, but why do you get involved in our projects? I mean, we love having you. It's a real thrill. But how did you find that, particularly in lockdown, when I said, will you join us on scrub choir as a volunteer?
Well, again, first of all, it's a great project. So congratulations to you and the team there for continuing to produce this amazing content and this amazing international connections. I mean, it's really been extraordinary. So it's a privilege to be part of it. But also, as I talked about, it gave me some purpose. It gave me something to work towards. It made me feel like I was part of a collective of people working towards the same goal. It was fun. It was nice to be able to do something at home that actually could connect with thousands of people around the world. And as I said, just to be part of something that seems to be making a real difference in people's lives. So it really wasn't hard work at all. It was a pleasure and a joy and a moment of brightness in my week when we got to do the recording.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to have you. And you're actually in the next one. We are Big Scrub Choir Plus with the international audience.
Yes.
Here's a little question for you. What's your first ever music memory?
The first one I do remember is it's Peter and the Wolf, listening to Peter and Wolf on an old LP. And I was 3 or 4 years old, and I remember it clearly. And in fact, my parents, it was connected with a painting that my parents had that Dad bought in the 60s. It's an old German romantic painting of a wolf looking at a full moon in a forest. Ooh. So the combination of the music and this painting is very powerful. I remember it vividly, and every time I hear that music again, it's always been in my life. And I think Mum tells the story of me being transfixed by it. I don't remember that, but I do remember it very clearly, and it just sort of flows through my body as naturally as anything. And
of course, Peter and the Wolf is storytelling in music, isn't it? They even explain it, and this is the bassoon is this, and this is all those things.
It's a masterful piece of not just great music, because it is great music, but connected to a story and so vividly. It's one of those pieces that you can't imagine a duck or a bird or the Hunters or Peter the Wolf sounding any different. That's what they sound like to me. That's my soundtrack in life.
I like that. We always ask our scrub session guests to have a think about a song they'd like to share with our patients and with our staff. And obviously we have the thrill of performing it together in our virtual magic. Tell us a bit about the song you've chosen.
Well, this is always a really interesting choice. You think, oh, what am I going to play? What's going to sound good? What's going to connect with people? And two things I thought about. One is a song that I've always loved, and again, it's connected with really powerful imagery, but also a song that fits well on the harp, and I think people will know. And it's a little song called The Rainbow Connection by Kermit the Frog. Well, it's not by Kermit the Frog.
It's by Kermit.
If anyone saw that first Muppet movie with Kermit sitting in the swamp there with his little ukulele singing this song, I mean, heartbreaking. But it's such a, I don't know, it's such a lovely, it's about connecting people, isn't it? You know, the lovers, the dreamers and me. It's about just the power of music to connect us all, whether we're sitting in a swamp on a lily being a frog and a ukulele or whatever we're doing. And I just love it, and it's easy to sing along with. And I'm no singer, and I'm going to sing it when I play it, but I hope everyone enjoys singing along with this beautiful tune. I mean, it's a gorgeous song apart from anything.
Well, it'll be glorious to sing it with you, and I'm going to actually get my daughter Olivia to sing as well. As you know, it's a beautiful singer and also a long-standing volunteer here at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. There's a bit of a pattern, isn't there? Thank you so much, Marshall. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I'd like to say, again, as we've talked about, is just for people to keep making music and keep engaging with music. And if you love it, just love it more than you've ever loved it before, because it really makes a difference. And if you're like me, you'll find yourself getting a bit teary more than you probably did before COVID, because you realise what it's like to live without music for a long time, and may we never have to do that again, but let's come out of it stronger and connect through music with the Rainbow Connection.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thanks, Emma.
For Scrub Sessions episode 4, Marshall McGuire has chosen this beautiful song, The Rainbow Connection, to play on his harp with guest singer Olivia O'Brien, who's been volunteering here for the past 20 years, and she's also a member of our Scrub Choir. How lucky am I? I get to sing BVs from here in the studio with my daughter, who gets to sing outside because of the restriction changes. So here it is, The Rainbow Connection.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows, and what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions, and rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it, but I know they're wrong. Wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Who said that every wish would be heard and answered when wished on the morning star? Somebody thought of that, and someone believed it. Look what it's done so far. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing, and what do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. All of us under its spell, we know that it's probably magic. Have you been half asleep, and have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Is this the sweet sound that calls the young sailors? The voice might be one and the same. I've heard lovers